Good evening, and welcome to What's Your Story? My guest tonight is Donna Jenner. Her story will touch your heart. It is with a great deal of pleasure and pride that I introduce to you tonight's guest, Miss Donna Jenner. Welcome to the show, Donna.
Thank you.
Would you please tell our audience a bit about yourself, like where did you go to high school?
I graduated from high school, from Nutmeg High School in Woodbury, Connecticut.
And the mascot was?
It was the Indian Chief.
The Indian Chiefs, okay. And where did you attend college?
I got my bachelor's degree from UConn, and I have my master's degree from Sacred Heart University in Fairfield.
And what was your bachelor's degree in?
General Studies.
And master's as well?
No, Applied Psychology.
Applied Psychology. Could you talk a little bit about that? What is applied psychology? Do we apply it every day and not know it?
We do. We do. Especially in my line of work. I work with a lot of attorneys.
Oh, boy.
I tease them. I need that a lot.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. You know, this is a particularly difficult show to tape because of its content. And I want the audience to know that this is a two-part show. That the first part of the show, the first 30 minutes, we're going to talk about your personal experience. The second half of the show, we're going to talk about your involvement with an organization that helps you deal with your situation. October 4th, 2007 is a day that your life changed forever. Would you please tell our audience what happened that day? Start at the beginning, please.
Well, it started out a day like any other. My son Anthony was 17 and my daughter Jessica was 14. And my son Anthony would drive the two of them to school. And when they got to school that day, they were told that there was a problem with the water and that school was canceled and they were sending everyone home. So Anthony called me and he said, school's canceled, and he said that he and Jessica were going to go to this local diner in town and they were going to have breakfast with a bunch of their friends, and they did that. And he called me back and he said, Mom, did you leave for work yet? He said, because we're going to have some friends back at the house. We want to get some Chinese food for lunch, so can you leave us some money? And I kind of teased him and said, geez, you just had your breakfast. Already you're planning your lunch?
Yes, yes.
And he said, yeah, Ma, can you leave some money? I said, all right, I'll leave you some money. So I left him some money and I left for work.
About what time was this? Did you go to work?
About 20 after 8.
20 after 8, okay.
Mm-hmm. So I left for work and I got a call just a few minutes later from a friend of mine, and she said that there had been an accident, that Anthony and Jessica had been in a car accident. And so she told me where the accident had happened, right in my town. And
which town is that, by the way?
Wolcott.
Wolcott, okay.
Mm-hmm. And so she told me where the accident had happened, and she said she would meet me there. So that's all I knew, that they had been in an accident. So I immediately got off the highway and drove to the accident scene. And when I got to the road where the accident happened, it's a really long straightaway, so as soon as you pull onto the road, you can just see forever.
Yes.
And there were all kinds of emergency vehicles and police cars, fire trucks, ambulances. The police had already set up, that yellow police crime tape. So I pulled into this parking lot that was nearby and just parked sideways and just started running down the road and running towards the car because I wanted to make sure that Anthony and Jessica were okay.
Yes.
And at that point, of course, the emergency people had no idea who I was, so they started yelling at me and telling me that I couldn't come through. And I just kept yelling back at them and saying, those are my kids in the car. And so then they just started yelling out to one another, saying, it's the mother. is the mother. And I kept on running, and all of a sudden, an EMT and an police officer, they just stopped me, one by each arm, grabbed me, and they said, "You need to come with us." And I struggled with them and said, no, you have to let go of me because I need to get up to the car. I got to make sure Anthony and Jessica are okay. And they wouldn't let me go, and they just kept saying, no, you need to come with us. And so I just started asking them, well, are they okay? And they said, you need to come with us. So finally I had no choice. I went with them. And what they did was they brought me into the back of an ambulance. So we get into the back of the ambulance, and I asked them again, are they okay? And the police officer said, I'm sorry, but they're gone. And I said, what? I said, no. I told him, you don't know what you're talking about. I said, you need to go. You need to get them out of the car. You know, I couldn't let that information in. You know, I said, you need to go. You need to go get them out of the car, and then you're going to know what's going on. And he didn't know what to say. He just stood there. You know, his head was down, and finally I got so frustrated with him, I just started begging him over and over. I said, go save my kids. Would you go save my kids? And then the EMT, he says, Donna, trust us. If there was something we could be doing, we'd be doing it. But I didn't believe him. And then they wanted to call somebody. They said, well, who can we call for you? I said, I don't want you to call anybody. I said, if you have to call somebody, that means something bad has happened. So I wouldn't even let them call anybody for me. And I didn't realize there was a third person in the car. So my son had stopped, and he had picked up my daughter's friend, but he didn't tell me that he was picking anybody up. So they asked, who's the third person in the car? And so then I asked if she was blonde, because at that time my son's girlfriend was blonde. And they said yes. So I gave them her name. And they went off with that information. They came back and they said, no, it's not her. She's actually here at the scene. So I thought about it, and I thought about Jessica's friend, Tamara. So I gave them her name, and they went off with that information. And actually, while they were standing by the car, Tamara's cell phone started to ring. So they answered the phone and asked person who was calling who they were looking for, and they said they were looking for Tamara. So they told them that there had been an accident, and they told it happened to be Tamara's mom. So they told her she needed to come. So her family, they came to the scene. Finally, they did convince me to let them call someone. So I let them call my mom. And then, of course, she called other family members who came. So they came to the scene. And then they came, and they wanted us to go home, because they said it was going to take hours to get the kids out of the car. And I refused to leave, because I told them I wasn't going to go anywhere until I knew that my kids were out of the car. So I probably got there about 20 of 9 in the morning. And at about 12:30, they came in, and they said that the girls were out of the car. And at that point, Tamara's mom, she was insisting that she wanted to see her daughter, and they didn't want her to. And but she insisted she couldn't accept that it was her daughter without seeing for herself. So they brought her out, and I didn't go out. She went out. She saw her daughter. They came back to me. Again, they told me to go home, that I should go home, because they said still it was going to take hours to get Anthony out of the car. And I told them, it was a restaurant where we were inside, I said, I'll sleep on the floor of the restaurant. I said, I'm not going anywhere until I know that both of my kids are out of the car. So again, I waited. A priest came. Now he waited with me. And finally it was 3:30 in the afternoon. They came and they said that now Anthony was out of the car. And at that point they said the medical examiner would come and talk to me. And then that's when he came in, and he said, and it was only then when he said, if you want to see Anthony and Jessica, you can come to Farmington. And it was only then when he said, you can come to Farmington, did it hit me, because I knew that Farmington wasn't the hospital. I knew that was, the morgue.
So the priest was there and the medical examiner. Mm-hmm. And what time did you actually get back home?
Probably about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Mm-hmm.
After arriving on scene at 9:30 the previous morning.
Probably 8:45, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
What happened when you got home?
When I got home, my best friend came home with me.
Yes.
I didn't want anyone to come home with me. I went home alone. I wouldn't let anyone come home with me but her. There was media, lots and lots of media, even at the scene. There was a helicopter flying over, reporters hiding in bushes. There was lots of media, coming to the door and trying, to get a story. So there were lots and lots of people coming. I just went up to my bedroom alone, locked in my bedroom, and my poor friend, my best friend, she just answered the phone, answered the door, and kind of fended people off, and, answered people's questions, greeted people, took messages.
Did you finally fall asleep?
No. I don't think I slept. I don't think I slept for 3 weeks. I don't think I slept. No, I couldn't sleep.
And how exactly did the accident happen?
Anthony was going down the road, and a man was coming in the opposite direction, and he was towing a boat on a trailer. And he made a left-hand turn in front of Anthony, and Anthony ended up hitting the back of the trailer, and he went out of control onto the wrong side of the road, and he had taken out a couple of mailboxes. He was trying to make his way back into his lane, and a large box truck came along. He saw him on the wrong side of the road, so his inclination was to change lanes as well. Unfortunately, at the same time that Anthony was trying to get back, and the two collided.
When did you finally go to Farmington to see your children after the accident?
Never did.
Oh, you never went?
Never did. No.
Did you know why you didn't?
I didn't want that to be my last memory. I actually had closed caskets. I could have had open caskets, but I did not want that to be my last memory. Someone at the funeral home knew my children, so they were able to identify them. So actually, the last time I saw them was when they left for school.
Vibrant, alive, happy. That's your memory.
Yes, yes.
How was planning the funerals?
Horrible. Absolutely horrible. Surreal. Like, yeah, you couldn't even believe that. Yeah, I couldn't even believe I was doing this. I went to the funeral home and I met with the funeral director. Again, it was me, and I brought my best friend with me. And the funeral director, I don't know if you've ever, you planned a funeral before. You walk into this room and it's literally a casket showroom, all different kinds. And they say to you, which one do you like? And you say, I hate them all. I don't want one. And, he says, well, I'm sorry, you need to pick out something. And so I ended up saying to him, you know what, just, I said, give me pink and blue. Just find something in pink and blue. I'll get pink for my daughter and blue for my son. And that's what he did. He looked around and he found something in pink and something in blue, and that's what I went with.
Now, on October 4th, school was in session, right? Mm-hmm. So the funeral must have been an enormous situation with people and things. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and of course now we had three teens.
Of course.
The wakes, and the funerals, they all took place on the same day. Anthony and Jessica were in one funeral home, and Tamara was in another down the street. And people literally parked far away, and they took shuttle buses. Like you're at a fair. And they took shuttle buses, and then they stood in line for 3 to 4 hours to come through. The line just went, all the way down the street. And people, big, tall, burly, big football player, friends of Anthony's just sobbing their eyes out. Horrible. No words to describe how horrible it was.
You've said that you were angry at God.
Yeah.
How so?
Because number one, I thought, how could God take both my children? Not one, but both. And you think, God is supposed to be protecting children at least. I'm an adult, okay, but children? I thought, where were you, God? Why weren't you protecting, 1, 2, 3 children? I was so angry. I thought he wasn't doing his job. Where were you? You weren't watching. You weren't doing your job at all. How could you possibly, let this happen? And you see people out in the world doing horrible things, and they're still walking the earth. And here are these, 3 beautiful children that aren't on this earth anymore. How could you let that happen? Or, or what have I done that was so horrible? Why am I being punished? And, and if I did something wrong, why did you punish these children? Why didn't you punish me? Or, yeah.
That was 2007.
Mm-hmm.
Still angry with God?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
What was your relationship with God prior to the accident?
I believed in God, not, a super religious person, mm-hmm. but, believed in God, believed in church, believed that God, protected people, and that's why I was so mad, saying you didn't do your job. Yeah. And after that, then I said, well, yeah, he wasn't there for me. Now I think I still, believe in God, and I think he's there for other people. He just wasn't there for me.
You said that after the accident, you had to defend your son against a bunch of negative press.
Yeah.
Could you tell our audience a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, there was a lot of bad press and a lot of misinformation, which didn't help things. At first they had the facts of the accident wrong. They said he was going 80 miles an hour. They didn't even have the way the vehicles were going the right way. He had actually had a prior accident in March. So people were very judgmental about that because he had had a prior accident. So people called him a murderer.
Because of Tamara's death?
Because of Tamara and my daughter as well. Mm-hmm. And people were judgmental of me as well because he had had a prior accident, and why would I allow him to drive after that? Again, because of the misinformation, saying he was driving, 80 miles an hour, and, he was doing this and doing that. And, I felt like I had to, try to communicate, what was the real story, and it was horrible. They had blogs in the newspaper. They'll put a new story in the paper, and then people can, write comments underneath it, and they just wrote horrible, horrible things. They didn't know him.
Horribly insensitive and hurtful things.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And you got to see those things. Mm-hmm. And you had to defend your son.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
What kind of person was Anthony?
Anthony, he was a real charmer. He was very, very outgoing.
I believe they're running pictures on the screen as you and I are talking. Very, very handsome young man.
Yes.
And a beautiful Jessica.
Yes. He was a good-looking kid. Very outgoing personality. If he met you, whether you were an adult or whether you were the same age as him, if he met you today and then he ran into you in the mall, he would have no problem coming up to you and saying, "Hey, Jim, how's it going?" A lot of time teenage kids,
yes.
they're not like that.
Yes.
But he was just very, very outgoing and confident. He was just very, very charming and fun to be around. He'd see me come into the kitchen, "Hey, Ma," pick me up, swing me around. That's how he was. Had a lot of
Was he a mama's boy?
Yes, yes, he was.
What kind of person was Jessica?
Jessica, I always say, if there was an angel that walked on earth, it was Jessica.
How so?
Jessica, she cared about people. She never wanted to see anyone picked on or hurt or, anybody. She always went by the rules. She was an excellent student. She'd have a project and she'd come home, something needed to be typed. Now, I've been typing since I was in 8th grade. Mm-hmm. And I'd say, "Well, Jessica, you wrote it, just give it to me, let me type it." She'd go, "Mom, we have to do it ourselves." I said, "But you did, you wrote the whole thing out, just let me type it up for you." No, everything, by the book, by the rules. That's how she was. And, someone should be on the bus, someone would be getting bullied, she didn't like what someone said to somebody, she would come home, "Mom, I feel so bad for so-and-so. This is what happened today." And she just had a heart of gold and a smile that would just light up the room. light up the room.
You said that there is a time when there are dozens and dozens of people around, and then there comes that day when there's no one around and you're sitting at your kitchen table. You don't have to go to practice. You don't have kids anymore.
Right.
That day came for you, did it not?
Yeah.
How did you handle it?
That's tough. Yeah, it's tough. Yeah, you get up and I'm like, now what do I do? You spent all those years, you're raising these kids and you're kind of going in a direction. Anthony was, getting ready to go to college, looking at colleges and taking SATs. And, Jessica was, she was in cheerleading practice and dance practice, and all of a sudden there's nothing. What do you do? I used to come home and I'd walk in the door and I'd walk out because I didn't know what I was going to do. And so I'd start trying to think about, what I'm going to do.
Okay.
I went to school, got my master's degree, joined a volunteer organization.
Okay. That's all the time we have for tonight's show. I want to thank my guest, Donna Jenner, for being here. This is part 1 of a part 2 show. Thank you for tuning in. Until next time, everybody has a story. What's yours? Good night.